Hey everyone, April Duran, also known as T-Bones here with the part 2 of the Mecha Dragon and Sorcerer with commentary. Uh, I know this took a while to get out, and I'm sorry for that. The program that I had previously working with kept crashing, so I'm trying a new program out, and it's working pretty well, so hopefully I'll stick with it. Now let's jump straight into what's going on here. This is a very complex piece because I chose to do each individual scale on this dragon, which won't be easy. And I also changed the entire pose of this Bell Knight. Now, I have this down to a pat because I've recorded this voiceover at least 6 different times, so hopefully I don't keep stumbling over my words like I normally do. Here you see I'm starting to render out the form of the Bell Knight, just trying to get those block colors down. Once again, I'm using a monochromatic coloring system because I'm going to be adding a gradient layer over it to color it just like I did with the rest of it. It gives me a good sense of visual direction. I'm adjusting things here and there, trying to get the forms right before I start rendering. You don't want to render a piece fully and then realize that the pose is wrong or something's off balance or it doesn't look quite right. So really make those changes before you go gun-ho into it, says the one who just rendered out that head fully and was terrified of touching it. As you can see, this white's appearing on your screen. That's a masking technique I'm using. I want to be able to paint the scales of the dragon freely without painting over that nice headdress and the rest of the Bell Knight that I've already created. So what I'm doing is I'm blocking it out on that masking layer, and then what happens is I can paint those scales. I don't have to worry about what's underneath them. I just go gun-ho, and then when it comes time to it, I apply the masking layer, and it covers up everything that's overlapping where I don't want it to overlap. That's why there's the white there. And you're going to see me painting willy-nilly over it. I was kind of messing around with a couple ideas on this one. I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach the legs, if I still wanted them to have the same scales that the rest of the body did, or if I wanted to do something completely different. And so first I copied the scales on the neck, and I was like, okay, what if I just copy and pasted those on the rest of the dragon? So that way it's nice and easy, it's already rendered out. And then I realized that's a lot of work and it's going to be really hard to make it look like it fits in together. So instead, I created a pattern for the scales, as you can see there, and I just copied them onto the form and I used the transformation tool in order to make them look like they're actually on the body. I warped them and twisted them a bit so it looks like it's wrapping around the dragon and it's not just cut and paste straight onto the dragon. That's important when you're doing scales or details like this that are very repetitive and pattern based is you want to make sure that it actually looks like it's on the form that you're putting it on and not just this flat texture. Otherwise, it's just not going to turn out right. Here, I'm just laying down the basic colors that I've been using for all of the scales. As you can see, I have that little palette up by the dragon's head that reminds me of the main colors that I'm using that I want to keep repeating throughout the figure so that way it doesn't look like the dragon's been done in separate parts like it has, or different sessions, that is. The only regret I had doing this type of technique, I suppose, is I didn't account for those long looping scales on the underside of the dragon, such as where the neck is. You're going to see a lot of trouble connecting that with the rest of the scales. And then with the arms, like I said, I was experimenting quite a bit with trying to figure out like how I wanted them to look. If I wanted them to have a different kind of scale than the rest of the body, if I wanted them to have the same kind of scales. Here I'm messing with grids, and then here I'm doing a U-shaped scale, which is common in lizard arms. They look really cool, but the problem was is it looked too different from the rest of the scales. I just don't think it worked, and so I ended up not doing it because it just looked too cut and paste, if you know what I mean, to where it didn't look like it was part of the same dragon. Once again, this part's going to be really boring because all you're going to see me doing is rendering out scales. That was the majority of this painting. That's why it took so long. It's a lot of work, making sure that they're all done. But as you can see, I'm not working on one scale at a time. I choose one color, I apply it throughout all the scales, and I go with a different color, all the scales, end up blending it all together. But when I say blending, you're going to notice I'm not doing super smooth blending. I'm not trying to go for photorealistic here. I remember talking with my art history teacher when the invention of the camera came about and how artists were terrified because now anyone could take a picture of something. Before you relied on artists to replicate something, a landscape, a person's face, all that jazz. And so they thought with the invention of photography, art was dead. No one's going to want it anymore. What's the point of having it? So they kind of had a moment of like, what are we going to do? I personally think photography was a gift to artists. And I'm not saying because now we have photographers. Yes, we have photographers, and they can make some beautiful works of art with photography. What I'm talking about is it allows painters to now just paint. Before, you were trying to go for tricking the mind into thinking that something was real when it wasn't. You're going for very realistic. And with photography, we didn't have to worry about making things realistic anymore because that's what photographs did. That's what they were in charge of. So we could just paint. And it did cause one of my favorite movements, which is the Impressionist era. I love those paintings, just the big globs of paint, how they're not mixed, the colors next to each other that trick the eye into thinking they're blended together. I mean, it's gorgeous. And so I don't really over smooth out my paintings. I let you see the brush strokes. I let you see those smudge marks, the way I try to blend everything together. I could make it really smooth and shiny. I could go for realistic. It's just not something I enjoy. And when I make art, I want to enjoy it. I want people to know I painted this. This isn't a photo. This isn't like some rendered picture. I painted this in Photoshop with one brush because I'm horrible at using different brushes. Don't do what I do. Have some texture in your life, have some variety. I'm scared of variety personally. I'm like a one trick pony. I find one thing I like and I just stick with it. I can brag though that at least I don't use just the round brush. Okay, I do use a quote unquote textured brush. So I have that going for me, which is nice. I'm just rendering. There's really not much for me to say here. It's just render, 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 render. By the way, every time you see a long pause like that, I'm probably taking care of the baby because I forgot to pause. I'm rendering the bottom of the scales here. I'm keeping in mind that the figure is there, cast shadows, reflected light. I'm going back in through the head because I thought it wasn't shiny enough for metal, and I'm adding these blue highlights, and I think it worked out really well, honestly. I'm really glad I did it. Just add a little extra pop, you know what I mean? I have this leg in the back. I had a brief moment where I realized that the leg isn't far enough in the background to really warrant having atmospheric perspective applied to it. But I ended up kind of janking my way out of that one by simply saying, oh, well, the magic smoke is going across the arm, and that is why it's a different color. So, yeah, I have this tendency of where, like, the background legs I make look like they have atmosphere perspective on it because usually I'm just doing quick concept sketches and I don't want to finagle the silhouette or make it look confusing, so I'll push back those back arms and legs in a lot of my silhouette pictures so that way I don't confuse myself, especially with complicated stuff. And sometimes I apply that to paintings when it shouldn't be. As you can see here, I applied the skills. I decided to go with kind of a medieval style gauntlet armor for the legs in the sense that it has these overlapping sliding scales for the knees so that way they can bend. And then for the parts that don't bend, it has the scales like the rest of the body. And I thought that fit quite nicely because honestly, Bell Knights usually have a medieval type style armor to them, so I thought they would apply it to their familiars. Kind of like this guy, even though he's a mechanical familiar. I like to think that they make armor for their familiars, for those little creatures and those little things that they pick up on their adventures, because Bell Knights really like interacting with other things and socializing, and they have a soft spot for animals, and they just kind of will go on an adventure they bring home, like, hey, check out what I brought home. And I was like, oh, cool. And it's like a giant snail or something like that. So they honestly are kind of like Disney princesses with how often they come home with some kind of new animal following them. And it's funny too because a lot of creatures are drawn to Bell Knights because they're usually souls that are very warm and caring, courageous, have honor to them. Now, something I'm going to get into with this whole universe is that each soul kind of dictates what it will be. So, courageous, honorable souls typically are made into Bell Knights because they fit the mold well, the purpose of a Bell Knight well. Scholarly, smart souls, souls that are inquisitive and experimental, typically end up as sorcerers. Ones that have a good tendency to be secretive or sneaky or kind of wily will end up more of a rogue or a spy. And each of these different classes are different kinds of, I guess, what you would call an object head. Bell Knights are, as you know, bells. They have bells for heads. I'm going to be coming up with the scholarly ones soon. I actually have a concept sheet started. I'll start recording that for you guys so you can see my process on creating these characters. And they are actually based off of candles. I actually got that idea from one of my students. I was subbing for an art class. I have one student in there who I like to talk to, and we were discussing how certain objects do have almost like this preconceived feeling to them or whatever. And like a total childhood teenager, he told me, Mrs. Duran, I think candles are for nerds. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. My sorcerers are going to be candles. And so that's what it ended up. So I have to thank that student for giving me that idea. A lot of my ideas actually come from my students because they say the wackiest things, I swear. I'm going to miss them. I'm not going to be teaching anymore, but it was a blast when I did. As you can see, I changed the face shape because I wasn't quite liking where I was going for. I think this one has a bit more of a kind of fancy feel to it with the way it hooks and curves and has the little bright points on it. And I'm re-rendering it because I didn't like how the original render was. It was ugly. So I changed it because I can, because I have the skill. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. I have not been sleeping. Here I'm going back through. I had the bases, the shadows, and the highlights down, so naturally I have to go back through and refine it because that's what I do. Which is just what the whole painting is, to be honest with you guys. It's just refining. I'd also like to point out that the last hour of the painting, where a lot of the special effects for the magic was done, did not get recorded because it turns out my hard drive got full. And so it just stopped recording. And I didn't realize it because I get in a zone. It gave me a warning and everything, but I don't read computer warnings. I just exit out of them. You know, like virus detected. You're like, nah, whatever. And so you just stop looking at them. So that's why the last hour of this is not recorded. So I'm sorry about that. I'll try to keep an eye out for that more often and maybe have it record to not the root drive because I don't have much space on it to begin with. So literally the rest of this painting is just refining. Paint the highlight, paint the shadows, paint this, paint that. Not really too interesting. I don't really know what to say in these videos for you guys. If you want me to talk about certain things like how to do this or how to do that, or hey, could you draw this? I would love to hear those. Because, I mean, if you've made it this far in this video and you're actually listening to me, thank you. I swear, I don't know if anyone's actually listening to these videos or watching them. Um, I don't blame you if you're not listening to me ramble on, because let's be honest here, no one wants to listen to someone talk for 14 straight minutes about work and stuff. Um, Here I'm just adding details. I like adding details. I just kind of push here and they're like, oh, it'd be cool if this had a circle, or if this had an indent, or like here I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if it had like a sun motif on the shoulder pads, which sucked because it ended up being covered by most of the paw, so you couldn't even tell the shoulder pads had that detail. So then I added them down to the little buckles at the bottom because I thought like, hey, at least they'll see that little part. So little random details for you guys. Remember, I was trying to go for an Australian themed one because Bubble Turtles, who commissioned this, is from Australia. And I wanted to have a little callback going like, hey, Australia, yo. It's funny because I was originally going to do a spider, but they specifically asked for a dragon. And I'm actually kind of glad because I don't know if I've been able to paint a giant spider. I've never painted spiders before, if I'm completely honest with you. So that would have been an adventure, I guess. Here you can see I'm kind of just fixing up this one part here and just rendering out everything. There's really not much more to say here. Video's about to end. I guess I'll just leave you guys to enjoy the last little bit of this. Um, Thanks again for watching these videos. I know they're not the best. I know they're not the greatest, and I know they can be kind of boring. But if it helps someone down the line, makes them work, and just really enjoys them, I'm happy. And you know, it's kind of nice just to show people how my process is done in case someone might find inspiration from it. I remember I used to love watching these growing up, so maybe someone will love watching mine. Thanks again for watching, guys. I really do appreciate all of your help. And remember, if you ever want to donate to help continue the Bell Knight universe, my coffee is in the description, and it's also at the end of this video. I appreciate every little bit, and I try to give a little doodle for everyone who does. Thanks again. Sorry I didn't record the last hour. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to all of you in hopefully the next video that won't take a month to make, unless, you know, I continue having issues like I did this time. Yeah. I don't want just silence at the end. I can sing for you. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 boop 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 boop. Do 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 do. Do 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 do, and it's done. Ta-da!